Some stories don't start with a scream. They start with silence, a chilling, deafening silence that settles over a home, a street, a town. On a quiet weekday morning, a teenage girl left her house just like she did every single day. The only difference was, this time, she never came back. This is the story of a disappearance that defies explanation, set in a small American town. You know, the kind where everyone knows everyone. People wave at strangers, and front doors stay unlocked just a little longer than they probably should. It's the last place you'd expect a mystery to unfold. Our story centers on a young woman. Let's call her Lara. Her friends and family described her as the definition of responsible. She was driven by routine, had a close-knit group of friends, and no history of running away. She wasn't leading some secret double life online, and as far as anyone knew, she didn't have a single enemy in the world. That morning, she called out to her family, "See you before dinner." It was a simple, everyday promise, and it was the last time anyone would ever hear her voice. The investigation began, and police started piecing together her final known movements. They pulled security camera footage from local businesses along her usual route. The grainy video showed Lara walking down a familiar street, her pace unhurried. She didn't look over her shoulder. She didn't seem afraid. She was completely alone, just another person on their way somewhere. Witnesses who saw her that morning later told detectives that nothing seemed out of place. She was just Lara walking down the street. But then, investigators stumbled upon something bizarre. At exactly 9:17 a.m., she vanished from every single camera angle. One moment she was there, walking past a bakery, and the next, she was gone. There was no footage of her turning a corner, getting into a car, or even pausing. It was as if she had stepped out of frame and into another dimension. No witnesses saw her disappear. There was no logical explanation for how a person could simply cease to be on camera in the middle of a public street. As the sun set that evening, a knot of dread began to tighten in her family's home. Her phone, when called, went straight to voicemail. Her social media, usually a stream of updates and photos, fell silent. No new posts, no messages read, no online activity whatsoever. Panic set in. Search and rescue teams were quickly organized, fanning out across the town and the surrounding woods. K-29 units were brought in, and the dogs immediately picked up her scent near her home. They followed it eagerly, leading their handlers down the very same street seen on the security footage. But then, just as abruptly as she vanished from the cameras, her scent trail stopped cold. Right in the middle of an empty stretch of road, it just ended. There were no signs of a struggle, no scuff marks, no dropped keys, no discarded backpack, just nothing. It was a dead end in every sense of the word. The question hung heavy in the air, repeated in hushed tones at the police station and in worried whispers across town. How does a person disappear in broad daylight, surrounded by people and cameras, without leaving a single trace behind? The town, once a picture of tranquility, became a hotbed of speculation. The rumor mill churned faster than the official investigation. Some whispered she must have run away, carefully planning her escape to look like an abduction. Others were convinced someone had taken her, someone who knew the town's blind spots and could orchestrate a perfect, traceless crime. But there was one detail, one nagging inconsistency, that made the entire case feel so much more unsettling, so much darker than a simple runaway or a standard kidnapping. 3 days into the search, as hope began to fade and fear took root, police made a discovery. It was something unexpected, found in a place it had no business being. This single piece of evidence didn't fit any of the theories. It didn't point to a runaway, and it didn't align with a stranger abduction. Once they found it, the case stopped making any sense at all. The questions only multiplied, and the mystery deepened, pulling the investigators and the town into a story that was far stranger than fiction. But what they uncovered next, well, that's when everything changed. Join us for part 2, where the truth finally begins to surface. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. In the last episode, we talked about a teenage girl who vanished without a trace, no witnesses, no evidence, nothing. For months, the case went cold, leaving a family heartbroken and a town on edge. But just when all hope seemed lost, something finally surfaced. Near the edge of town, in a remote, wooded area that had been searched multiple times, investigators found an object. It was a personal item belonging to the missing Tina journal, but there was something deeply unsettling about it. The journal was completely clean, untouched by the elements, despite having supposedly been out there for months. It was sitting right on top of a pile of leaves, almost as if someone had just placed it there for them to find. There were no fingerprints, no signs of a struggle, no damage to it whatsoever. It looked brand new. This single discovery changed everything. The case was no longer just a missing person investigation. The police now believed they were dealing with something far more calculated, far more sinister. The placement of the journal felt like a message, a taunt. Someone was playing a game, and the police had just made the first move. This new evidence sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detectives immediately went back to square one, re-examining everything they thought they knew. They dove back into phone records, scrutinizing every call and text message in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. They were looking for a hidden conversation, a secret contact, anything that could point to a clandestine meeting or a hidden life. But her digital footprint was clean. There were no suspicious calls, no secret social media accounts, nothing out of the ordinary. It was the digital equivalent of a ghost. Then they moved on to re-interviewing everyone. Her friends were brought in again, one by one. The story was always the same. She was happy, she was excited about the future. She never mentioned any problems or anyone she was afraid of. They described her as reliable and predictable, not the type to just run away. Her teachers at school echoed the same sentiment. She was a good student, always present, never causing trouble. They hadn't noticed any changes in her behavior. No sudden drop in grades, no strange absences. It was as if she was there one day and simply gone the next. The family was interviewed for what felt like the 100th time. Investigators pressed them, looking for any forgotten detail, any argument or tension that might have been overlooked, but the family insisted their home was a happy one. There were no major fights, no hidden resentments. They were a close-knit family, and her disappearance had shattered them completely. Every lead they chased evaporated. Every person they interviewed offered the same frustrating answers. The deeper they dug, the more confusing it all became. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The lack of evidence was, in itself, the most damning evidence of all. It suggested a level of planning and precision that was terrifying. This wasn't a crime of passion or a random act. This was methodical. Someone had orchestrated her disappearance with chilling expertise. And this was the theory that kept investigators up at night, something about this case didn't follow the normal rules of crime and logic at all. After months of hitting dead ends, the pressure from the public and the media was immense. The town needed answers, and the family was desperate for closure, but the authorities had none. Eventually, they had to make a public statement. In a somber press conference, the chief of police stood before the cameras and announced that despite their best efforts, they had no suspects, they had made no arrests, and they had no confirmed explanation for what happened. The case wasn't being closed. They stressed it would remain open, but it was now officially labeled inactive. For the department, this meant shifting resources to more current cases. For the town, it was a signal to move on. The yellow ribbons eventually came down. The news cycle moved on to other stories. Life for most people returned to normal. But for the family, time stopped on the day she disappeared. Their world was permanently frozen in a state of not knowing. Every knock on the door, every phone call carried a flicker of hope that was quickly extinguished. The empty room, the unanswered questions, the silence, it became their new reality. An inactive case file is just paperwork for some, but for them, it was a life sentence of uncertainty. Years have passed since she vanished. The town has grown, new families have moved in, and the memory of the case has faded for many. But the questions still linger, like ghosts in the autumn air. How does a person just disappear from the face of the earth, leaving behind almost nothing? Why did that single piece of evidence, the journal, appear so mysteriously, so immaculately clean, months after the search? It defied all logic. And the biggest question of all, the one that haunts her family every single day. If she didn't leave on her own, and all evidence suggests she didn't, where did she go? Who took her? And why? These questions hang over the town, a permanent, unanswered riddle. Some stories end with answers, with justice, with a final chapter that brings closure. This one didn't, because some mysteries, the truly terrifying ones, refuse to stay buried. They live on in the whispers of a small town and in the hearts of those left behind, forever waiting for an answer that may never come. Thanks for watching. And if you want to hear more stories that defy explanation, make sure to subscribe.